There's a lot of talk in the New Age, schmage, about the Tao of the ancestors, or Tao. Well, what does the Tao of the ancestors mean, except that you are the rearranged genetic component of your particular genetic stream, and your grandfather, your great-uncle, your grandmother, your great-aunt had ways of doing things. Pitting peaches, planting beans, trimming flank steak. That's the Tao of the ancestors, that there's a way to do things. And that when you do things that way, that is the appropriate way for you to do it. And you can tell it's the appropriate way because there is very little energy loss. That's what the Tao is. It is appropriate activity.
Well, I think, people have the notion about tribal people that their life is very hard. In some environments and some situations it is, but people try everywhere to create leisure for themselves and to have an opportunity for aesthetic expression. In psychedelic societies, everything is art. I'm thinking particularly of, for instance, the Shipibo in their classic expression. The Shipibo are an Amazonian tribe. They cover every utilitarian object with design. Everything is an expression of the images of the internal world, and language and puns and this sort of thing become very important. Life, when you have nothing, life is easily transformed into art because there's a how-ness about everything. How you make a fire, how you cast a pot, how you cook a monkey. Everything is a paradigmatic activity, meaning everything is traditional, everything has been done millions of times before in the way that your people do it. And so the individual is seen almost like just the cutting edge of the ancestral energy. And they even have the concept of what they call the way of the ancestors. And so you'll be doing something like sharpening a stick, and someone will come up to you and say, "Don't do it that way. We do it this way. This is the way of the ancestors." Then they show you how to do it, and sure enough, it is easier to do it that way, probably because this is the morphogenetic field of the how-ness. And I think Ralph mentioned this morning the confluence of yoga, alchemy, and shamanism in the Taoist tradition. And I think it's worth stressing that because to my mind, Taoism is the most refined ideal of human existence. It is open-ended. It always yields to a good laugh. It's not dogmatic. It's rooted in nature. It sees the world as shells of energy that can be manipulated and cultivated. And I really see Taoism as something broader than the nature religion that arose in southern China pre-Confucius and so forth. I see it as the kind of natural way of being in the world that tribally alive societies settle into. And it's what we're trying to recreate. Appropriate activity. That alone would create a world-informing revolution. When I say that we must change our minds, the physical accompaniment to changing our minds is that we will begin to behave appropriately, bury our shit, manage our resources, lower our voices. It's simply awareness, awareness, and awareness of awareness. And this is what these societies have that we have lost. And I think it's because the male ego is a wart on human perfection. And everybody has one. It's not a put down of men. The male ego is a part of the repertoire of every human personality in the modern world. But it is unnecessary, divisive, and out of Tao. And this reconnection with the Tao, with the flow, with the invisible, the spirits, the energies of sky and water and earth, the psychedelics impel us into recognizing these things, but it's our own intent that can allow us to bring these things back into the world and apply them. So for me, that was the lesson of so-called primitive people. No, I think the Taoist thing, I'm coming more and more to it, to see that it's its open-endedness, its insistence on humor, it's not grinding a bunch of dogmatic knives. And now I'm talking about the cultural ideal of Taoism. Taoism became secularized and, played power politics at various times in the history of China, just like the other Chinese religions. But its ideal remained the psychedelic ideal, I think. And it's basically a dropped out ideal. It isn't that you should return to the court and take up the counsel of the king and try to save his ass. It's that, someone else can take care of that. But these Taoist immortals became strange people. I mean, they were fleetingly glimpsed from the road, running naked in the woods as people passed to and fro. And knowledge, I have said this before, made the analogy between understanding and gravity. That, as something becomes gravitationally more and more dense, it eventually is so dense that light can't leave it. No information can leave it. It's said to be a black hole. It has curved space around itself and no information can leave it. I think as you advance on the path toward enlightenment, it becomes harder and harder for people to understand you. And when you finally achieve enlightenment, you can't say anything at all. And anything you say must be misunderstood. That's the proof that you're enlightened. If you're a perfect black hole, you must be incomprehensible. No information must leave you. So if you understood anything I said tonight, it's a perfect proof that I'm far from enlightenment. There's something which has been called the Tao of the ancestors. What that means, I think, is simply that for each one of us, there is a way to do the things we must do that is the most energy efficient way to do it. And I'm talking about opening a door, picking up a fork. The best way to do it is to follow the creed that is the Tao of the ancestors, to recognize that you are a genetic expression, a partial genetic expression of a gene pool which has received genetic expression at each generation in your family for thousands and thousands of generations, and that you are just the latest recension of this gene pool. Then you release the ego and you act with this awareness. These are psychedelically induced states of being that I think make it easier to live in the world. And how many of them are there? Who knows? For instance, under the influence of psilocybin in the Amazon, I noticed what I am completely convinced is an atrophied human ability. It's a very simple ability, but we have lost it. It's the ability to know how to walk from point A to point B, not following the shortest distance, but following automatically the path of least resistance, so that you don't go down into valleys and then climb hills. You automatically stay on ridges, even though you take more circuitous paths to your goal. And I could feel this sense working. It was just like a part of the dashboard that had previously been covered up was uncovered. Here was a human sense, which we don't particularly need because we've erected linear cities where the path of least resistance usually is a straight line. But you can imagine people in rugged country, this is a sense which would confer great survival adaptability and be tremendously important. Something so extraordinary is happening on this planet. I mean, you know, for hundreds of millions of years, biology flowed across the surface and species advanced and retreated and sensory organs were refined and redefined and so forth and so on. But about 35, 50,000 years ago, language broke loose. And language is the sheer will of information itself to transform itself. I mean, our medium is meat, but we are made of information, you know, and that information could be fed into a computer, crystallized into a virus. What we are is a long message that is being typed out in proteins by thousands of ribosomes, coordinated over time. We are sort of like a phonograph record. And when you're young, you know, certain enzyme systems, certain genes are turned on. And then you pass into midlife, other genes are turned on, certain genes are turned off. It's like a melody, theme and variation being brought back, the theme being enriched and worked, and then finally the whole thing builds to a crescendo, and then one by one the genes are turned off and the audience tugs on its overcoats and cabs are hailed and people go home for the evening. But that's what you are. You're a story, a piece of code being run in the great computer of the world. But nothing lasts. You know, not your friends, not your enemies, nothing lasts, and we deny this. And yet that's the great psychedelic truth. And if you can face it in every moment and live it, you will have a very, very complete experience of existence. You will ride the Tao toward the concrescence and be able to live in the light of its anticipation. And this, I believe, makes for a healthy life full of lots of laughs. I mean, what are we to make of ourselves? Whither mankind? Are we to be ultimately viewed as a cosmic accident, the perils of unfocused intelligence? Or can we reflect the inner dream, the inner image of wholeness that inspires us and makes us more than animals and raises us up as a simulacrum of the goddess? That's what I would hope for. And thought, cognition, planning, caring, emotion, communication, intentionality, focus, and authenticity are the domains that we have to be in order to carry this off. You wanted challenge? Some of you have made fortunes. That was no challenge. You wanted a challenge? Save the planet. There's a challenge. That's what everybody who came before did. They participated sufficiently at least to pass the buck to us. Can we participate sufficiently to pass the buck to our grandchildren? Or are we just going to go down as the lamest generation in the life of the planet? I can't believe it. I know too many of these people. I love too many of these people. We just need to do our best. As the Grateful Dead say, you know, just a little bit harder, just a little bit more. You can't go back. And you can't stand still. If the thunder don't get you, then the lightning will. So, forward into the future with a high heart and reasonable hope that we can make this planet into a living reflection of the inner dream. So, if you understood anything I said tonight, it's a perfect proof that I'm far from enlightened. But thank you for coming anyway.